And as small as it may seem to someone else, it was very big to me. It was in essence saying, at some point you will dine in these places and you should know what to do with the damn utensils, Elena. Yeah. All right. Welcome, guests, to Inside Copy and Art, the podcast. I am thrilled to be joined today by two of my favorite people on the planet. So we have here Lynn Collins and Stan Mehr, and we're doing this podcast in honor of Mentorship Month, but today happens to be Thank Your Mentor Day. And so I get an opportunity today to thank two people who, in very different ways, changed the trajectory of my life. And so, in ways big and small. So my hope today is that we'll have some fun. You'll get to know them. And we'll get to share our story a little bit so that in your own life, you can kind of think about how you might be able to help inspire someone else. And maybe you'll learn that it actually doesn't take a lot to help someone. And that help that you consider small could actually change their entire life for the better. And if that's the case, then why don't we celebrate that today? So thank you, Lynn, and thank you, Stan, for joining me. All right, we're gonna get started. Everybody knows who I am. I'm the owner of Copy and Art, proudly, and I love interns, and I love my employees, and I love the idea of mentorship. And I certainly, as an offering here at Copy and Art, bring it to every employee that there's this opportunity. If there's anything they see in me on the personal side that's interesting to them, they can tap me as a mentor. So then they would have a special meeting set up through my assistant, and it's hats off. So like, I'm no longer a boss or the owner, I'm just Elena. And maybe they're going to get married soon, like somebody behind the scenes was, or they're going to buy a house, or they're thinking about having a family, and they know I have 3 kids and a happy marriage for many years. And they're allowed to tap me and just ask me advice. And we never, ever take that conversation anywhere else. And that is open to all. I'd probably say a handful of them take me up on it. It's fine. Like, there's no pressure around it. I think it's just really important to put it out there. And then you have to have people grab it or not. So that's my story. Lynn, I don't know if you want to start. Why don't you tell our audience who you are, what you do now, and then we'll get into like how we met and all that fun stuff.
Sure. Lynn Collins. I have my own consultancy called Lynn Collins Communications, focused on communications, PR, and marketing. I work with a handful of smart, interesting, creative people. I'm also a mom, a working mom. I have 3 children, Christopher 16, Matthew 14, and Adriana 10. So that's what I'm up to, and happy to be here.
And you had a great wedding. You went to Rome for our wedding. Okay. Yes. Stan, tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do today, and all that fun stuff.
Sure. Thanks, Elena. I'm Stan Mehr. I'm the president and the owner of SM Health Communications, as well as the content director for Biosimilars Review and Report, and the principal for Revisions Communications Editorial Services, which is a business for marketing small business communications. Most of my career has been in healthcare publishing. And the gist of my entire career has always been healthcare writing, policy writing, clinical writing, writing about insurance, writing about the managed care industry, but writing and editing is the underlying themes here. And through my luck, I'm very lucky to have been working in the medical publishing firms for a number of years, whether it was Harcourt Brace Yovanovitch back in the 80s, and then Medicom International, Lejac Publishing in the 80s, then Medicom International in the 90s. I've been fortunate to have 150, 200 employees come through these companies and meeting all these folks, in a lot of cases hiring them, a lot of cases keeping in contact with them. And when you asked me about the to come in to do this mentorship podcast, I was thinking, how does mentorship actually begin? And I think that's part of the issue. It's not really something that's formalized. You had mentioned, Elena, that you've basically mentioned to your employees that you're open. Your door's open. Ask me anything. I'll help you. With me, it's more people ask me a question organically, and then it turns into a longer relationship. Then it turns into, can you provide me references for this job I'm going after? Oh, why are you going after this job? And they're asking me, what should I tell people about this job when I'm going for the interview? And then it becomes a much more, I'm not saying intensive, but a much more detailed relationship that keeps going on as people's careers continue. So I've been working now in this industry for 45 years, which is mind-blowing to me. Probably mind-blowing.
You don't look old enough to say it.
It's mind-blowing to the industry itself, believe me. But the fact of the matter is, when you've been in the industry that long, or in any industry that long, you get a reputation for certain things. I hope my reputation is one of, professionalism and mentorship.
Right.
To everybody who's worked for me, with me, and I've worked for and with. So I think it's something that happens organically from my perspective.
Okay.
And it doesn't take much effort to keep it going. It's just a matter of being open to having those relationships. So I would say probably, Elena, you're probably one of maybe 3 of the really long-term relationships that I've had in mentorship, mentee. And probably over time, I may have mentored 50 or 60 people in some way or shape or form.
I meant to mention that, first of all, a couple things. First, Stan was my first boss, period. And I wasn't going to mention that I was your favorite employee at any point on the air because I don't want to get you in trouble with anybody else. Anyway, just kidding. Don't get mad. Don't send him emails. I just like to bust
Peter might get mad, but that's about it.
I don't know. We'll see. No. So Stan was my first boss, and there are a lot of cool memories we have, and the relationship started very much like, I was straight out of college, straight out of Stony Brook.
Yep.
Also his alma mater. But there are so many parts about our relationship that I think helped shape why I consider you a mentor, and and kind of all the things that you've done to kind of help shape where I am. Then why don't you tell me, and we're going to get to some of those fun facts. Why don't you tell me a little bit, or why don't you tell our audience a little bit about your philosophy? What do you think when you hear mentorship? Do you think about it a lot? Like, what's your perspective, and how do you feel when I say that you're someone who I consider a mentor?
I think mentorship is really important, and finding those people in your lives who can really bring you up makes all the difference in the world. You can go to school and get your degree, but there are things once you're in the trenches that you need to learn, and having that ally has helped me along the way. I've been fortunate enough to surround myself with strong women that I could aspire to, who I wanted to be when I grew up, that kind of took me under their wing and showed me the ropes, things that you don't necessarily learn in school. It's table stakes when you come into the workforce to, have that degree to be a great writer, but it's really more some of the nuances that you don't learn in school so much. So I've been lucky enough to be part of organizations like an organization called Advertising Women of New York that later relaunched as She Runs It. But being part of those committees and seeing some of those leading female women that had great careers, that really had an interest in pulling up the next generation.
Right. So it's interesting, if anybody's wondering, so how did you guys meet in this case? So before Stan hired me, he was very, very smart to, make this hire. And you can laugh, people, it's okay. I actually had the benefit of getting hired by the guidancechannel.com. I don't think it exists anymore. As an internship or externship for Stony Brook. And that's where I met one of my other mentors, who you're going to hopefully see later in the broadcast, in the episode. She couldn't make it today, but is committed to trying to be here to talk about it. Her name is Jen Brady, and she was my internship coordinator, and I was an assistant editor for the website, and I had a great time with Jen, and I really, really tried hard. And if you fast forward, I wrote about this on LinkedIn, got a lot of play actually. It was a little bit vulnerable, but it was a moment where it was the last day of the internship, and I was so excited. I was really convinced I was going to hear something great about my performance and about how I was going to make a great editor in the future. And anybody who knows me knows that I do have pretty high standards, and I'm a little tough on myself. And I was ready. And I looked at Jen's face when I walked in, and I said, uh-oh, this doesn't look like it's going to go the way I think it's going to go. So we talked a little bit about my performance. She was very happy overall. And then she was very nervous, and she said, Elena, I don't, if you want to be an editor, you'll be an editor. And I was like, oh, not what I expected. She said, but, and I was like, here it is. She's like, I don't actually think you should try to be an editor. She goes, but I have a list of all my editor friends here, and I'd be happy to give you the list, call them all, refer you to any of them. She goes, but here's what I'll tell you. Throughout the time at the guidance channel, she's like, you lit up when it came to marketing ideas, promoting the site, getting people to know we existed, thinking about interesting partnerships or collaborations. And that's not really what an editor does. So, and so my eyes were watered so much so that I thought if I blinked, I would definitely cry. And I was trying not to cry. And she said, but my best friend is the PR maven in New York City. That's exactly what she called you. And she said, her name is Lynn Collins, and she works at a top ad agency in New York City. And I will call her to see if she can just walk you around the agency, give you a tour. I'd be happy to do that. That's my best friend. Her career is very important to her, but I think that that's where you should probably go. And so I chokefully thanked her, went to the bathroom and cried, and then she put us in communication. That's when you walked me around your then agency, and I fell in love with advertising. There were people on scooters, there were people with their dogs next to their desk, and people playing ping pong, beer in the fridge. I was like, people get paid to work here? How the hell does this work? And that's when I fell in love with the industry. And then you were kind enough to introduce me to people. And actually, I don't know if you remember this, but there was this soft offer to go into consumer as some low level something. And I remember the brands, I won't mention them, but I ended up turning it down because I knew my passion was healthcare and pharma. And people were like, wait, you're choosing pharma? You're choosing the boring, non-sexy stuff? And I said, yes. So, but I then knew that I had to understand a little bit more about this industry. But my father was like, get a job. And I had applied to Medicom International, and this is where I met Stan. So tell me a little bit about that moment. You know Jen very well. What do you think that meant to her to be in that position? Because listen, if it wasn't for her saying that, I never would be sitting here with you now in this capacity.
So when I got a phone call from Jenny that I had to meet you, of course I was going to go out of my way to do everything possible. I mean, the ad business is built on relationships. It's very personal. And that doesn't mean nepotism. It means you want to be surrounded by people of diverse backgrounds that bring energy.
Right.
And so, yes, of course you were an English major and, had the smarts, but you really have to be passionate and love what you're doing to do what we do in the ad business every day. And so that's what really sets apart one person from another. And that was just radiating really from the minute I met you, the energy that you have and you continue to, emulate around everybody that you meet. So relationships are so important from every single angle because it's just part of the business, but it's really like creating those relationships over time through the span of my career, whether they be mentors or mentees, quite frankly. That's probably the best part of my business, and what I love about what I do is, forging those personal relationships.
I agree. I agree. And I was so thankful to you. You were like a friend immediately. And the interesting part was no agency. There was like a soft offer. I don't know if you remember this. There was like a soft offer for two of the brands. But I was in love with that agency because they had come up with a campaign that in pharma, which I really enjoyed. But they weren't offering the pharma business as a way in. So I turned down the little thing that, which was actually a big thing, the intro kind of to that agency, and ended up getting rejected by agency after agency because I didn't have the experience to move into even a junior position. So that was something to learn. It was like, and something we think about here at Copy and Art quite a bit, because what a miss on a lot of those agency side. Not that I think that I'm great, but it's, I actually did have the stuff for an intro entry level position, but nobody would give the opportunity until I had 1 to 3 years experience. So here at Copy and Art, we take a little bit of a different approach. But in between, I ended up getting a call from you. So talk to me about, or talk to the audience about our early days. It was quite a different Elena.
Oh yeah.
We can edit it out.
We don't
Too much truth. We'll edit it right out.
We'll skip the truth. We'll gloss right over that. One of the things that we did at Medicom, where you and I first worked, basically we had that entry-level position set for people coming out of college. We always knew we needed it. From experience, it was sort of like we had a ladder to go through.
Yes. And
the editorial assistant position was that ladder. So if you had a degree in English, communications, or in science, that person would get be tortured with our copy editing test, which I believe you did pass the first time.
I did pass it. I might not have been pretty.
I don't know that anybody was amazed by it, but you passed it, and we hired you, and filled a definite niche that we did have. Now, as with all our folks coming in from college, there's a bunch of polishing to be done. The polishing, of course, is going to be what do you really like about the editing business? Now, Elena was all over the place. She loved everything about it. She loved being in the farm, being in contact with farmers, being into science, being mentored by other people in the office, because there were several other editors in the office at the same time.
Yes.
The fact that we were constantly taking trips together.
Yes.
To cover various meetings. One specific, I remember the very first one, very, very specifically San Diego. And it's those trips when you do finally understand who this person is, you get to talk to this person outside of the work environment and get a better idea of what they were. Elena was driven, not by the meeting itself, but she had to get a present for her parents for their front steps. It was either going to be wind chimes or like a mobile or something like that. And we were in a hotel area in San Diego, next to Fisherman's Village, which is still there to this day.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's a big market area. And we went to every shop they have, every craft shop they had, and we were going from place to place to place looking for these wind chimes, or was it wind chimes?
It was a wind chime.
It was a wind chime. And it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. So we were there in San Diego, I'm guessing about 3.5 days or so, having lunch, having dinner, sometimes having breakfast if we didn't have to get up too early for the meeting itself. But, it establishes a relationship. It establishes what my expectations as an employer are of the employee. And I'm thinking, how long is that person going to take to get there? And, what I understood immediately about Elena was she was enthusiastic and ambitious about every aspect of it. So where I did not know that she was actually more interested in PR and the agency work at the time, I knew that whatever she did, she was, as with every employee we had, they're going to need to be able to master this first. This is a way to get into any other aspect of the publishing business, being in copy, being able to write, being able to edit, being able to coherently think about structure. about these various things that we're doing. We're writing up a meeting highlights, which was so much a part of our job back in those days. And the fact is, you start those relationships from scratch, and it builds over time. And sometimes it doesn't build too well. Sometimes that doesn't. Those trips, you don't make that connection. You don't understand who this person is. But with Elena, I think it was pretty clear where she wanted to head. She wasn't going to take very long to get there, or at least in her own mind anyway. But I also, got a good feeling that, this would be somebody who I'm probably going to end up in contact with for a long time, for one reason or another.
Well, yes, and I wasn't letting go. So he was stuck with me. One of my favorite memories about one of these trips, and one of my favorite parts about Stan, was we could go to the meeting and we could do the job, and then we could go and do whatever we wanted to or nothing. And he always took the opportunity to show me around wherever it was we were going. And all of these places were places I had never been. But I'm in my 20s and I'm like, wait, we're going, what? What are we doing? And he showed me La Jolla, the black sand beaches, and he brought me one night to, I don't know if this is true, but in my mind, it was a 5-star restaurant.
That was Phoenix.
That's Phoenix.
Yes, I remember that very well.
Okay, I don't know if you remember it for the same reason I do.
Yep.
But we sit in this beautiful restaurant, and I remember thinking this might be one of the most beautiful restaurants I've ever been to. And we sit down, and there are what felt like 15 utensils in front of me. And I'm looking around, and it's beautiful. And he takes the risk, I think, and he says, do you know the purpose for every utensil at this table? And I said, no. I don't dine in places that have 3 spoons, 4 forks, and 4 knives. I'm exaggerating. And he said, okay, I'm going to tell you what they're for. And in that moment, it was different than teaching me how to write for a pharmaceutical client. It was teaching me something, in fact, that my family couldn't teach me because we didn't dine in places like this historically. Oh, great family, great living, great childhood, but we just had never done that. And he took the time to teach me the purpose of every utensil and when to pick up the big fork and when to not pick up the big fork and why there were all these spoons. And little moments like that show you the character of who somebody is, I believe personally. So thank you for that moment. I'll never forget it. And as small as it may seem to someone else, it was very big to me. It was in essence saying, at some point you will dine in these places and you should know what to do with the damn utensils, Elena.
Yeah. Well, I had the same reaction you did. I knew that you were going to make it. You were so driven, so talented, and had so much passion that whatever field you went into, I think you were going to nail it. We're just lucky in the ad world that you chose advertising. And as we know, never a dull moment for sure. But I think as we set out, finding that mentor is not just like when you first start your career. It's really through every stage of your career that you should find those mentors and those people that believe in you. And so when you find a boss or a client or somebody who believes in you, you want to do it your best for them.
Sure.
I mean, it's in, their best interest to put faith in you and to act as a collaboration and a partnership, because you're going to get better results that way. And,
absolutely.
And so I always tell young people when they're first starting out, yes, of course, we know the power of LinkedIn and finding jobs on LinkedIn, but now that we're done with the pandemic, you have to get out in the real world and forge those relationships and make those personal connections. You never know. You could just be sitting in Starbucks and you could be sitting next to a CEO. I mean, that's what really I think I would like to inspire the listeners here is like forging those personal relationships and getting out of your box and out of your comfort zone to really stretch and grow and meet people to find who you are and find those people that, like you said earlier, it could be just 5 minutes, spending 5 minutes with somebody, and you don't know how meaningful that might be and set them on their career path.
Yes, absolutely. And now I think it's for someone like me, it's important to differentiate yourself. In this working environment post-pandemic, where so many people just want to stay at home and work, even young people who don't have health conditions, it's really easy to differentiate yourself because so many people are basic and so many people are taking the shortcut and so many people think they're going to actually, and listen, everybody's allowed their opinion, myself included. I tell young people, it's like, don't take the easy route. Show up in the office, dress as nice as you can, set yourself apart. And especially today, it's so much easier because everybody's taking the out. Monday and Fridays, we can work from home. And I'll be here sometimes and I'll see team members walk in. They don't have to. They're just choosing to work here and they're coming in here. And it's a smart decision.
Well, you've attracted the talent because you create that kind of culture. So not every person who's listening to this will have that company culture. So sometimes you have to go outside your organization to find maybe a more formalized mentorship program.
Mm-hmm.
However, when you have that kind of culture where it's an open door policy and you can be a mentor even outside of the professional realm, but like you're a working mom, how do you do it? I think that really fosters a great working environment and a place where people want to, they're working here and passionate about what they do. They want to come to work because they're enjoying it, and it defines it. It's not just a 9-to-5 job, right? It defines who they are.
Right, it's part of it. As work will be part of most adults' life. So interesting. So fast forward, I end up going back to school. I enjoyed my time at Medicom. Stan was by far my favorite part. But I made a lot of good friends. Some of them are still my friends today. Had a really great time. Loved Bronxville, New York. Shout out to Bronxville. And I knew we would stay in contact. But I ended up, after getting my MBA, getting a spot at a top healthcare agency in the city. And when I did, not too long into it, Jenny and you and I went to a bar in New York City and we were chatting. And I was talking to you about a romantic interest I had at the moment. And one of my favorite parts about the mentorship, and the reason I bring up utensils at dinner or the conversation that you and I had, is because to me it takes bravery to step outside of what someone might think is appropriate advice. And sometimes, you should think about that, right? But I was talking to you about this love interest and you asked me a little bit of a firestorm of questions. I always wanted a big sister, so it felt very big sister-ish, so I could actually appreciate it. And you asked me question, and I answered, and you said, get rid of them now.
Well, I usually am not that blunt.
Yes.
I usually
we might have had a cocktail.
I'm sure we had a cocktail or two. And if I do...
You were kind, and thank God you said it. That's the whole purpose. It was like, you were so right. So I remember originally being like, what do you mean? And you said, wait, this is who you are. I know who you are. This is the following reasons. And
I'm a big fan of opposites attracting, right? I mean, I won't get into my marriage, but it works, right? We have a wonderful, long standing relationship, and we're very opposite.
Yes.
Yes. And you also have found love and a wonderful partner.
Yes.
I think where the distinction lies in terms of, are you aligned on the future goals?
Well, that was your main issue of contention, and that was your position, and you were 100% right. You saved me so much heartache. But you know how in general and today people are afraid to develop close enough relationships where they can say the truth. I always ask permission if somebody does ask me a personal question. I'll ask permission to be honest, and I'll also say, you can take my advice and shove it if you don't like it, or send me to shove it, but it is nice when someone recognizes through either experience or that you might be going down the wrong path, and they're brave enough to say, maybe don't do that.
I don't think you can be a mentor if you're afraid to disagree and basically dissuade someone from what they think is right, which you clearly feel is not the right path. I mean, I just don't think that's a way to go. Otherwise, you're just basically confirming everything they want to do, and
Right.
What is that?
Well, and all I'm talking about is like what worked for me. Yeah. I have a lot of young, talented people. I'm meeting a lot of people now that are very curious about the story. How do you start an agency from a basement, and how do you do this and how do you do that? And I always like to be honest about the team, but there was also this team of you guys and a couple of other people that believed in me before there was evidence that any of this would happen. So, part of this episode is definitely to say thank you to both of you, because I certainly wouldn't be who I am or here if you both hadn't taken the opportunity. And, so fast forward outside of Medicom, I have a great career rising in advertising, and then decide I'm going to start my own thing. And fast forward back to Stan, where you came into my life again when I talked to you about that, because I knew at this point you were a very successful consultant and had your own stuff.
Yeah, well, it's a big conversion of both mindset and operationally to go from being editorial director of Medicom International with 35 employees to basically coming home and you're staying in your office and you're trying to reach out to other people and be successful as a freelancer or as a consultant, or decide to grow your own business. Now, you wanted to grow your own business, clearly. And I knew that, even though you were first starting out as basically sole consultant.
Yes.
With one client, essentially. So it was a question of how do you do that? Now, that being said, I'm sure Lynn would be here if she did follow astronomy. We'd be here talking about
astronomy.
The seventh asteroid she's discovered.
I was an astronomy major, and I wanted to work at NASA.
Yeah. So
that didn't work out, clearly. So that's okay.
Well, it could have been a side gig, Anyway, I have a telescope in my house.
I love astronomy.
But in any case, I think the idea is, when people make these sort of major decisions and major transitions, it's very rare that you could do it yourself.
Right.
And the right answer to everything, or right answer to some things, in fact.
Or anything.
Yeah. Because when I did the same thing, when I became a consultant, I talked to somebody that we knew for a very long time who was in the managed care industry, a guy by the name of Pete Penna.
I remember Pete Penna.
Yeah, he used to work for Group Health Co-op.
Okay.
And he became a pharmacy consultant himself, started his own business, and I grilled him for hours about, what do you charge for these services? What do you do? How do you handle this? What happens? Your old relationships, how do you handle them? And whereas my situation was a little bit different, and I think yours was similar, though. When I left Medicom, I was still getting some business as a consultant for Medicom.
Yes. My first year, I was a consultant for the agency.
Right. So you were,
Yep.
So that
year
was,
and a half. That's how I started.
I mean, that's like the best soft landing you could have. Okay?
Yes.
You've got built-in business. You're not starting from scratch.
Correct.
And you build from there.
Mm-hmm.
So it became, I think you went from the agency to that work for Janssen.
Mm-hmm.
And, that sort of launched everything over time.
Yes.
But every time you do, whereas my own position, I was not interested in building a new business and being a business again with multiple employees. I was interested in, doing the most I can do for myself. I didn't want to have to worry about other employees. I didn't want to have to necessarily supervise other people. I can network help, as a consultant, and you can probably do it yourself. When, if I need help, I can find people to help.
For sure. I think we have similar paths, because I couldn't have just graduated from school and become a consultant. It's because of along the way, I spent time at Footman and Belding, at DDB, at Deutsche, and Saatchi for 10 years. And so I built up those relationships and contacts. And then I watched one of my mentors start her own consultancy. And, when I went off on my own 5 years ago, I had somebody to sort of show me how that's done. Yes, you have to put ink in the printer now and do your own expenses and
yay, love that.
Yes, make your own flight arrangements.
Right.
There are those things that you have to do owning your own business and pay your quarterly taxes, for sure. But it can be done, and I think having mentors along the way and doing reverse mentoring, having the younger folks that I've mentored over the years show me as I, started to learn how to, how do you use Twitter? How do you use Instagram? Those are all necessary tools, and couldn't have become a consultant without having that mentor-mentee relationship over the years.
I don't think I told you. I may have told you, Elena, during one of our trips, where I started coming out of college. I started with a company called Plenum Publishing, which was eventually bought by Springer and became part of Springer Verlag. And my first mentor was a woman by the name of Betty Bruns. And I came out with a biology degree. Mm-hmm. And, I could write, but I wasn't formally trained in copy editing. So this place, Plenum, was Midtown in New York, mm-hmm. and it was known to be it's a training camp, boot camp. You can cut that. Boot camp for copy editing. And so Betty, I was there for 9 months, and it's really interesting the way the whole industry worked, because I was there for 9 months, and everybody knew this place was a training camp for copy editors. Okay. And after 9 months, everyone gets called by a headhunter. Everyone.
It's like this place.
I guess so.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
So ends up, Betty Bruns was my, 9 months. She was intensively making sure I knew how to copy it. She was correcting me on everything. She was doing the same thing we used to do. Sit you down. Okay, we went over the proof. Okay, these are the errors you probably missed, but this is how you find them. And it became a situation where, okay, now I feel comfortable doing it, and doing it in these highly technical sciences, which I was not trained in.
Right.
I was editing physics books. I was editing a book called Turbulence in the Free Atmosphere. It was...
That sounds terrible. I mean, wonderful.
It was a Russian translation. And this is the interesting thing. This was the 1970s, the middle of the Cold War. Plenum Publishing was the only publishing company in the United States that had I guess it was rights to translate Russian technical academic texts, and they had people who did that, but they needed people to convert the Russian translations mm-hmm. to English into readable text. The problem was this book, Turbulence of the Free Atmosphere, was 75% integral equations.
Oh yeah. Aren't you sorry you missed that, Lynn?
I'm very sorry I missed that.
So I started looking at these equations saying, you got the wrong guy. I can't do this. It's nonsense. So Betty said, it doesn't matter. We have people to check the mathematics. All you need to do is work on the paragraphs that connect the equations up. If this happens, then this happens.
Right.
And they show you equations. And it goes on from there. So Betty actually acted as almost like my counselor, as well as the copy editing chief, to try to get my head around what the heck I was doing.
I think you need to call Betty today and thank your mentor.
Well, actually, I would, but she's long gone.
I was going to say, I hope Betty's still around.
Yeah, she was, I think back then she was probably in her mid-50s. She loved to ice skate. She was one of these people you saw at Rockefeller Center in the center of the ice by herself,
really?
Doing pirouettes and everything. And she would go every day after work.
So she inspired you to be the mentor that you became.
Well,
yes.
Certainly she was an inspiration.
Yep.
And I think I understood from her part of the role of mentorship. There were other mentors at this company too. These crazy people, for some reason, stayed at this company. They paid you nothing, but they stayed anyway. But they were, highly educated, extremely knowledgeable, probably experts in their individual fields.
Right.
But you talk to them, and just talking to them is like getting an education in itself.
Right.
Well, it's a company culture, right? And that really is what makes talent stay.
Yeah.
Because of the job market now, right?
Yep. And that company, that was like being, like say boot camp. It was like being in a boot camp. Everything's regimented.
Right. That was my first agency job.
Yeah.
It was at an agency that really knew how to teach.
Yeah. You're going to spend the first 2 hours doing this work. You can have a break of 15 minutes. And God forbid if you're gone for 20, you're going to hear about it.
Yeah.
And then you do this, and then you're going to have lunch, and then you're going to go on to this next project, and then we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about what you did and what you didn't do.
Yep.
And everything, so much of that has changed in the course of the publishing companies anyway, mm-hmm. and in general corporate life. But just having someone to guide you through what's normal, what's the expectations,
right?
And how do you manage that?
I'm lucky enough to continue to mentor in a program called the Marketing Academy that has young marketing executives, and a question that they always, and they could be very structured organizations with layers and layers of hierarchy, and a question that I get over and over is like, well, how do I get noticed? I'm not really up for a promotion yet. There's certain things that need to be done, and my answer is always the same, and maybe it's useful for this audience as well, as to find things outside of your 9 to 5 that you're passionate about, where you can contribute your talent to. So whether that be the ad council, a pro bono campaign on mental health awareness, maybe it's the ad club, it's giving back in some way, shape, or form, because that is not just good because it makes the world a better place, but it's good for your professional
For your
path
visibility.
as well.
Sure.
Exactly. So those are things, and when you do things that matter and you follow your heart, that's how you get noticed. And then it becomes very authentic. It's authentic. If you're doing something that you believe in, then people are going to believe in you.
Yes, absolutely. When I used to, and I know we're approaching time, when I would call Stan, when I started to work independently, there were a couple of areas that were really important. One was, how much do you charge? And nobody wants to tell you that. And since in business, most people are looking to pay the least amount of money, it was important that somebody who knew was guiding me, and he was always guiding me and telling me when I was going too cheap and my rate was too low. And he was also clear. And, one of the biggest motivating factors for me, I don't know that you said it with that intention, but I had talked to you and I had said something about my agency. Mm-hmm. And you said, how many clients do you have? And I said, 2. And you said, when you have 3 to 5, you can start to call yourself an agency. Right now, you're just a consultant. And he didn't say it rude, and he might not have even said it with my tone. But I remember thinking, oh, okay. And then I worked my tail off to get more clients, to be able to call myself an agency, to call him back and tell him I had more clients.
Right. It's almost like a critical threshold. When you're not simply just for naming purposes, but also for sustaining purposes.
Yeah, no, right.
Obviously it's very important because one client, and we talked about this, you have a pharmaceutical client, notoriously, if it's a pre-launch product, the drug doesn't get approved, you suddenly have no pharmaceutical client. Right. And that could be 50-60% of your business. So you really need that diversification. But I learned that for the same way from my own previous mentors, where and I mentioned this before, Pete. I asked Pete, what do I charge for the services? And everybody does the same thing. They don't understand what the value of their service is to someone else.
Or they want to win on price, and they don't want to win the other
No,
ways.
they don't. They may understand what their budget is for a project, but they don't understand what your hourly time is worth.
Right. Oh, you mean the client side?
Yes. And from a business, you're trying to start a business or get your feet set in a business. Do I charge $75? Do I charge $125? What do what's reasonable? And that's something that it takes a lot of effort to understand or get your arms wrapped around. What is the service that I'm providing actually worth? What should I be paid?
Right. And I remember you said, and we're against time now, but I remember you said if they accept the proposal too quick, you should have charged more. And so we'll kind of end on that.
A mentor's going to tell it like it is, right? And so hopefully you've built the trust with the mentor over time, and so you're going to be receptive to hearing it. So a mentor's going to tell you, some hard things that you might not hear from someone else, but all the more reason why it's important to find one.
Well, and all the more reason it was to have you guys here today. I want to just look you in the eyes and say thank you, and thank you for your role in kind of shaping my life thus far. And I look forward to...
We're not done.
I know we're not done. I've got a lot of work, but here's the deal. I received a gift, and I'll end on this, over the holiday break from one of my employees. And it's this necklace I'm wearing. And when I opened it, I said, oh man, I'm going to have to tell her it's broken. And then I read what it was for, And it basically was a pendant to remind me that I'm breaking glass ceilings every day. And so clearly, in some way, shape, or form, I'm doing something right. My sister-in-law, oddly, also gave me the same gift. So I appreciate it on both sides, but it was really kind of cool for an employee to do that. At night when I'm thinking about all the things I could be doing better, this certainly is a good reminder. And I wear it also on behalf of you for helping me. So,
Well, keep going. You're unstoppable.
thank you. I mean, we got some work to do still, all of us.
More ceilings to go through.
More ceilings to go through. So thank you so
Thank you
much for being
having
here.
us.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, this was an important conversation. I'm happy you were my guest. Thank you all for joining, and we'll see you next time on Inside Copy and Art, the podcast.